Cap this with your clinching paragraph, which will answer the following questions. Number one, why study business operation of a resort? Remember that there are lots of possible topics, but what led you to the choice of this particular research topic? Also, you will have to note of what gave you the impetus or what prompted you to focus on resort XYZ, considering that there are lots of resorts in Pangasinan, or there are several in the city of Dagupan. Then what made you decide to choose resort XYZ? So these are the questions that will be answered relative to your clinching paragraph. So based on the proposed title, how are we going to frame your statement of the problem? So you may be guided by the following example. So note that the first part of the statement of the problem would indicate your research objective. What is for the research objective relative to this particular example? The study aims to assess the business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City with the end in view of determining its operational issues and concerns in order to have a basis for the enhancement of the business. So relative to the research objective, we may be able to address more specific questions as the following. Number one, what is the status of business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City along the following aspects? Number one, organization and management. Two, services offered. Three, facilities and amenities. And number three, marketing. Note, however, that the items under the first subproblem may vary from study to study, and depending on what you think you are interested in covering in your investigation. So I would then be relying on what the research team want for the conduct of the study, supported by a valid basis for backup. So you will need to discuss this with your co-members in your team. Why are we doing this study? Why business operation of Resort XYZ? And in more specific terms, what aspects of business operation will be the focus of attention and why? And from there, you'll now be able to address other sub-problems. Like, for example, what problems are encountered in the business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City, and what plan of action can be proposed to improve the business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City. So this is how we write the problem statement. The problem statement, as a way of having a rundown of our previous discussion, would account for number one, your research objective, which is made part of the first paragraph or the main problem statement, while the more specific units of analysis for the investigation will be covered in the second part, also known as the specific problem or sub-problem section of the statement of the problem. And to aid you in the development of your statement of the problem is activity number 8. So activity number 8 is formulating SOP. SOP stands for Statement of the Problem. So in this particular activity, you will be asked to, number one, determine your research objective and have this framed in a paragraph form, similar to what we have given, for example. Well, depending on what you have for your title of the investigation. And secondly, what specific problems or sub-problems may be drawn from the main problem statement. And that is statement of the problem. Okay? So that's for the first two subtopic under the first chapter. Again, we have the first subtopic, rationale, and of course, your statement of the problem. Okay? So then we proceed to the next subtopics under chapter 1. The next set of topics would cover the last three of the mandatory subtopics. And these are scope and delimitation, we have significance of the study, and then finally, we have definition of terms. So let us begin with this series of discussion of the last three mandatory topics in the first chapter with the scope and delimitation. So the scope and delimitation as subtopic in the first chapter will be dealing with two sets of discussion. So the first set of discussion would determine what will be covered in the study, and the second would be that which are not covered in the study. So talking about scope, we will be talking about what more specific aspects are covered in the study. And secondly, what related aspects are not made part of the investigation and explanation of the non-inclusion of these aspects in your present study. Let us start then with the more specific guidelines or reminders in the writing of the scope and delimitation. Number one, the delimitation for section relating to what are not made part of the study. It will state the variables or concepts which are excluded, meaning what are not studied and due to what circumstances or certain weaknesses you have in your study, and indicate the variables that are to be contained in the study. And this will now be for your scope part of the discussion, and this will form part of the first paragraph. So the first paragraph should be a discussion of the coverage or the scope of the study, such as the variables, concepts to be studied, locale, and period of study, and the persons involved. So the second paragraph, therefore, if the first paragraph would be all about what are covered in the study, will be dealing with the delimitation, or those concepts that are not covered in this study or in your study, and the justification for the non-inclusion of some variables and concepts. Remember that part of the scope would be a mention of where this study was conducted. But please note that a full-length discussion of your research setting is aptly placed in the third chapter and not in the first chapter. So you need not discuss further on the more specific details of your research setting other than the mention of the place of the conduct of investigation. So that is to be found and to be placed part of the discussion in the third chapter. So that is the scope and delimitation. So noting of how we operationalize this mechanics, let's go back to the earlier examples relative to fiscal management, the barangays in Dagupan City, and of course, the second example pertaining to business operation of Resort XYZ. So let's take a look at a more specific example, where in the second example, we'll only be noting of what will serve as outline in the development of your scope and delimitation. But this is an example, okay, of how we write our scope and delimitation. So we have, for example, relative to fiscal management in the barangays of Dagupan City, the following discussion. So the study will focus on the broad fields of fiscal management, encompassing activities and operations as revenue sourcing, budgeting, allocating, expending, purchase and supply management, and tax administration. The report shall be delimited, or limited, I should say, that the prefix D should be stricken out, because when we talk about delimitation, we would be talking about what are not covered. But in this example, we are talking about what we have for coverage in the study. So please strike out the prefix DE or D. Okay? So such that the scope of the study would be in terms of the two areas. We have revenue generation, and of course, we have revenue allocation and utilization. So the report will include the technical aspects involving bookkeeping, accounting, and auditing procedures. So that's for an example of discussion under scope and delimitation. So let's have for our second example what we can have for discussion of scope and delimitation relative to the second proposed title. So talking about business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City, you may have for your scope the following. So the variable of the study. What is the variable of the study? The variable of the study is business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City. And what areas of the study are involved? So you would be noting of your sub-problem number 1. What did you identify for specific aspects to be covered in the analysis of the business operation? We have organization, we have facilities, we have marketing, and others. Number 2, determine what period is covered in the study, meaning what will be your point of reference. The marketing operation of 2014 may differ from 2015. Therefore, it is important to note what is your point of reference. So what period of operation you will have in your investigation, or that will serve as the basis for your investigation. And then you will say, for the study on business operation, it will be dealing with the 2015 operation. So 2015 operation of the facilities, of the amenities, and of course, organization and management. And then point out the locus of the study. So what is meant by locus? Locus meaning where you have conducted the study. So if, for example, we're talking about business operation of a financial institution, there might be several branches in the different parts of the country. So you'll note, if your focus of attention is the Dagupan branch of financial institution XYZ, then the locus of the study will be the Dagupan branch. Okay? Or in the case of barangay fiscal management in the barangays of Dagupan City, so you'll be noting of the 31 barangays. Okay? Or in the study involving business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City. So you'll note of Dagupan City as the locus of the investigation. And then the second part would be dealing on the delimitation. What aspects of the variable is, or variables that are not included. And what related subjects are excluded. And explain why such are not covered in the study. Example, sub-problem number 1 for status of business operation. We have identified 4. We have organization, we have facilities and amenities, we have services offered, and of course marketing. Note that in addition to these 4, there are other aspects of business operation, one of which is financial operation. Why did you, for example, did not include financial operation? A possible reason may be the management did not grant the approval for the discussion of anything that has to do with the finances of the organization. Hence, you will not be dealing with the financial operation of the operation of Resort XYZ. Okay? So that's for the scope and delimitation. Now, what about significance of this study? The significance of this study is that section that will stress the importance of the conduct of the study. And you will note of what groups or entities will benefit from the conduct of the study. No, we are talking about what groups or entities will get out of the results of your study and not from the business entity itself. So, you will be thinking of what possible yield will be brought about by the conduct of the investigation. You try to analyze who do you think or what groups or entities will benefit for a study involving fiscal management in the barangays of the Dagupan City, or let's say business operation of Resort XYZ in the Dagupan City. So, try to think of what entities and in the order of the amount of benefit that they would get. Meaning, identify firstly those or the groups that will benefit the most. So if you're talking about fiscal management in the barangays of the Dagupan City, obviously it's the barangay governments that will primarily benefit from this study. Also, other barangays from other cities or municipalities, or say accountancy students or accounting technology students. And of course, do not forget that this study of yours may serve as reference for future researchers, and therefore the last of the groups to be identified as benefiting from the study will be the future researchers. In like manner, in a study involving business operation, we will be noting of how this study will impact, number one, the management. The management of Resort XYZ as primarily benefiting from the results of this study. And then, of course, other similar businesses or other resorts operators. Then we have business students or HRM students or tourism students or tourism practitioners or business administration practitioners. And then, of course, last on the list will be your research, future researchers. Okay? So, you will need to note and explain how these groups or entities will benefit. So, ano yung makukuha nila? What would they get out of your study? So, this will be done in paragraph 4. So, in the example pertaining to business operation of Resort XYZ, you will have the following groups. Number 1, Resort XYZ management, business operators of similar ventures, and of course, business students and future researchers. And that's for significance of the study. Now, let's move on to the last subtopic in the first chapter. And this will complete the set of 5 mandatory topics in the first chapter. So, the last subtopic is the definition of terms. What is this definition of terms as a subtopic in the first chapter? The definition of terms will more or less level the playing fields between the researchers and, of course, your potential readers of your research report. Note that not all potential readers of your report have background in the topic that you have for your investigation, the topic that you have chosen for your investigation. Meaning, for the first example pertaining to fiscal management, you do not assume that all readers of your report would be accounting students, or accountancy students, or accounting technology practitioners, or those who have a background in accounting. Therefore, you will note of how the terms that you used in the study are defined. And there are two ways by which we define terms in research. First is the so-called conceptual definition relating to the lexical meaning. And the second would be your conceptual / functional definition. So the second way of defining term is providing a specific meaning based on how you have used the study, you have used the term in the purview of the study. Okay? So it's providing a more specific and detailed meaning to the terms used in the study. But the question is, what are the terms to be defined? How many terms? Okay. And what will serve as basis for determining what terms are to be defined? There are two things to note of. Number one, and in the order of priority, we first look into what terms are reflected in the title of the investigation. Again, as a way of review, what information are made part of the title of the investigation? Number one, variable of the study. The variable of the study is the topic of investigation. So, based on the two examples given, the variable of the study for the first example is fiscal management in the barangays of Dagupan City. And the second is business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City. So, how many terms? Note, we are to define terms and not words. Some researchers would commit the mistake of having to break the terms down into words. Say, for example, business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City. What they will do so that they will not have difficulty in giving the meaning and to just note of the lexical meaning is to fragment the terms into, say for example, what is business, what is operation, what is resort, based on meanings that you can derive from universal references like dictionary. But the question is, will this give to you the exact meaning of the terms that you use in the study? The answer is no. Therefore, you should not break down the terms into words. So, what or how many terms are there in the two examples? The answer is, in both the examples, there's only one term. And that is number one, fiscal management in the barangays of Dagupan City. And number two, business operation of Resort XYZ in Dagupan City. So this is the first term. So after having defined the first term, then what then would be the source of other terms? The answer is, go to the specific problems. What do you have for specific or sub-problems? Example, for fiscal barangays in Dagupan City. Talking about status of fiscal management, along two aspects. We have revenue generation, and then we have resource utilization. And these are two sub-terms that need to be defined as well. So, you will define also part of fiscal management, revenue generation, and revenue allocation and utilization. The same is true with business operations. So what do you have for sub-problem number one? What is the status of business operation of Resort XYZ in terms of organization, in terms of facilities, in terms of services offered, in terms of market? So these are already four sub-terms it will need to define part of business operation. And then, after having defined all these subterms, then you go to the next subproblem. Subproblem number 2. What do you have for subproblem number 2? Problems. Of course, you will have to define problems encountered in the operation of blah, 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 blah. And then lastly, your subproblem number 3, or all about your action plan or plan of action. So these are the terms that are to be defined. So the next question would be, what way of defining terms are we to observe in the terms that we have identified? The answer would be, it depends on how you have used the study or how you have used the terms, okay, in the purview of the study. Kung paano mo ginamit doon sa study. That's a choice between conceptual or functional/operational. Example. Remember your example relating to correlation between academic performance in college and the CPA licensure examination performance. If we, for example, would be providing the meaning of CPA licensure examination on the basis of existing law, that is an example of a conceptual meaning. So that's when we provide a conceptual definition. But if we, for example, would be noting of problems encountered in the operation, question, will there be a universal reference where we can get the meaning of the term problems encountered in the operation? The answer is no. And therefore, you will need to give specific meaning. And that's when you will succumb to what we call as operational/functional meaning. Then you'll give the meaning for problems encountered in the business resort operation of Resort XYZ as problems encountered by Resort XYZ in the Dagupan City refer to issues and concerns that are considered limitations insofar as the day-to-day operations pertaining to organization, services, facilities, and marketing of Resort XYZ are concerned. So that is an example of an operational/functional definition. Okay? So that completes our discussion of the 5 mandatory subtopics in the first chapter of the UL prescribed report. So now you are ready to write the first draft of the first chapter. So after this lecture, you will be doing activities 7 and 8, and immediately thereafter, we'll be putting flesh to the outline that you have developed relative to the background of the problem, and of course, to writing the first chapter on the basis of the 5 mandatory topics. First is rationale. 2, we have statement of the problem. 3, scope and delimitation. 4, we have significance of the study. And 5, definition of the terms. Okay? But even before you do the writing, you must ensure that you have already sought the approval of your business entities, which is why Sir Irwin will have to discuss with you the mechanics of preparing the letter of permit to conduct a study and have this served to your respective business entities and show to be proof that these business entities that you intend to have as basis for your study have approved your request for the conduct of the study. And this I will have to ask from you on Monday, that is next week. So with that, I say Happy writing, everyone, and hope you will have an enjoyable moment with your team members in the preparation of your first chapter. Good day.